is Marcella. I'm the chair of the Northwest CPC. I'm happy to have everybody here. So first, I'm looking for the agenda again. So let's call this meeting to order. We're not going to make a motion for the approval of March minutes because not everybody on the committee has received them. So that will have to be at next month's meeting. And our first speaker is Chief of Police Harold Medina. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here this evening. Just wanted to give a little bit of an update. I do have a commitment that I hit 2 CPCs per year per area command. So this is the one for the first 6 months of the year. And just want to thank everybody for participating and volunteering their time to be part of a CPC. And I'm just going to give an update basically in 4 areas. The first area being crime. I know that crime is probably the biggest issue our community is facing. It's in the news every day. I'm happy to report that we are at 35. We're at 27 versus 35 homicides last year. So we're down by 8 year to date. Last year, our clearance rate for homicides ended with a 50% clearance rate. Right now, we are at 107% clearance rate. And you probably ask, how can you be above that? Clearance rates per FBI definition are actually calculated with total number of homicides cleared even from the previous years. So we're doing pretty good in increasing that clearance rate. I attribute that a lot of the leadership, the changes we've made within the homicide unit in the past year, the restructuring and the detective academy. Traffic, always a big issue in the city of Albuquerque. We've almost doubled the number of traffic citations this past year. And we also are seeing a decrease of 33% in our traffic fatalities that our traffic unit has been sent out to. There are some areas of concern. We have seen an increase in robberies throughout the city. We have been very active in being out doing operations. My other big concern crime-wise is we've had a steady increase of violence towards our officers. We just for whatever reason, not just APD, BCSO, state police, we're seeing an increase in assaults on officers. We had 5 officer-involved shootings basically in the last 5 weeks. We will continue to advocate for a stronger criminal justice system. You know, I truly believe there are some people who need diversions. They need drug counseling, mandated drug counseling, not voluntary. We need some individuals who are mandated to go to mental health treatment. But there are also some people that are dangerous, have proven to be dangerous. And, you know, they quite frankly, some of those individuals need to stay in jail a little bit longer and decide what kind of life choices they want to make. Recruiting, we're still recruiting well. We have lost more people to resignation than retirement. Very concerning. It's a national trend that major city chiefs just spoke about a month ago at a meeting I was with them. Anywhere from the 1 to 10 year mark, we've lost more officers, along with other agencies losing more officers than ever before. We actually had 2 sworn officers who quit to take civilian investigator jobs because they just were really fearful of some of the national trends in terms of accountability and some of the last couple years of the thought process towards defund the police and some of the obstacles that law enforcement has had. We'll get through this. We always do. We have hired some key civilian support staff in other areas. We have IA investigators from the civilian support world that are from the civilian world that are helping us with our force investigations. We have some that are assisting us in evidence processing for electronic case evidence such as cell phones and social media and homicide. So we are utilizing civilians whenever we can. Second area that I'll talk about is the settlement agreement. We're looking forward to the next monitoring report. Key things that we saw was 157 of 157 cases were investigated and completed within timelines. We did increase the amount of timelines for our investigations through the last collective bargaining agreement. We don't have to ask for extensions basically anymore. We're looking forward to this report. We're anticipating that we're going to have a big jump in compliance, and we'll wait till that's released. But I have seen the draft report, so I do know what the great progress is, and I want to commend everybody in the department who's participated and helped us move that along. Community policing, our ambassador program continues to flourish. It continues to work with all the different diverse parts of the community. Just last month, they had a recruiting event with the Black community, trying to bring in more diversity to our police department, and we'll continue to work for two things: for diverse recruiting with the ambassadors, and also for being that ear to a part of the community that sometimes goes unheard. We're starting to do a lot of coffees with the cop again. Now that we're getting out of COVID, we're starting to get more engaged and get back to the way we used to do things, and hopefully that will continue. And that covered recruiting. We know we're keeping our numbers about the same, but we are losing a lot of people, but we're hiring. We're using civilians where we can. The settlement agreement's working, moving forward. It looks really good. We talked about the crime rates, how most of them are looking really good this first part of the year. And yes. And the last thing we'll just talk about real quick is just our whole ability to continue to motivate our officers to do their job. And the field has done a great job. 117 felony arrests last month. So we will continue to do everything we can to ensure that our officers are out there proactive and doing everything they can. The 12-hour schedule is starting to show a little bit of a decrease in wait times on many of the priorities of calls. And with that, I'll take some questions, but I do have a hard cutoff of 6:30 because unfortunately my mother fell yesterday and I have to go pick my dad up at
Yeah, good evening, Chief. This is Jeff Miller, Vice Chair for the Northwest, and thank you for coming to the meeting tonight. The one question that I have is, you mentioned violence against officers is on the rise. In speaking with officers out on the street, there's been a lot of them tell me that they may arrest people who they're charging, as an additional charge to the initial encounter with the civilian who they have to arrest, that it could be some assault on the officers, and they're going unprosecuted, for lack of a better term, I guess you could say. In other words, the assault, I know 5 years ago, I had an analysis report given to me from APD, and 5 years ago, we were on a 10-year high for assaults on police officers, and the prosecution rate was way low. Have you sat down with the district attorney and asked, why is it, one officer gave me an example. There was 3 on him in that 1 month, and 2 of them were dismissed, and 1 was plea bargained down. So, I mean, I could pull out more because I do write it down, but I'd just like to know, have you sat down with the district attorney and asked them to pursue the charges? Because that's not a case where the law isn't there to do it. That's a case of we're not pushing the law, just in this citizen's opinion. So thanks, Chief.
No, that's a great question. And I think I've been very critical of the criminal justice system, and at times I've been criticized for it, but I stand by the decisions I make. Our criminal justice system, without a doubt, is broken. I'm not going to finger point to one specific part. There are many parts that have had to be overhauled. APD has to take some ownership in the way it was processing cases, and that it had to make changes. We've developed a detective academy. We're hoping to build stronger cases. In 2019, an LFC report came out that the case preparation unit, that SHIELD that we started, had doubled the indictment rates. We need the other parts of the criminal justice system to improve. I don't agree with certain things that have occurred. It was well publicized that we had a judge who released somebody that we had arrested, and that judges had signed probable cause to say that they was enough to arrest him for 2 homicides, well planned, well orchestrated. So I do meet with the DA. I'm happy to say that we have a strong relationship. We do communicate through this, but it is a struggle across the board in our ability to move cases through the 2nd Judicial District. We have to remember that the courts have been shut down because of COVID. I do want to applaud the New Mexico State Supreme Court. They have listened to us. They have made some changes, and hopefully that this isn't just a case of officer being victim cases not being fully prosecuted. It's a matter of a lot of all cases not being prosecuted. So we will continue to do everything we can to ensure that all cases, whether the victim is an officer or a civilian, gets prosecuted, and we increase those numbers.
Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm satisfied. I just wanted to make light of it that I would like to see, we talk about accountability and we put a lot of accountability onto our police officers. We're doing a lot of reform, but the other side is they have cameras that give evidence as well that should help them with their cases. And I just wanted to shed light that I would like to see, because I always believe things start small and they get bigger. If people think that they can get away with spitting on a police officer because that's an assault, or hitting them or kicking them, I know of one female officer that was off the job for quite some time due to, when she got into an altercation, so to speak, on an arrest, and she was off duty. I just wanted to shed some light on it, that the public is aware. And, we're going to hold the officers accountable. We need to pursue and hold the criminals that assault our officers accountable, and to maybe push at the DA just a little bit. I'm not sure if that's where it is. I'm not finger pointing either, but that's where cases go to get prosecuted. So that's all my request was. Thank you. And Chief, I hope your mom gets better.
Thank you.
So the next question, and this is from Dr. Stephanie Mack, and drug update. Dr. Mack, do you want to go ahead and elaborate on your question?
Just wanted to know, either generally speaking across the city or even specifically in the Northwest, any new strategies or any statistics that you can share specifically with the rampant drug reuse and movement that is everywhere, not just in Albuquerque or New Mexico. So just any updates in that area?
Drugs are definitely impacting our crime rate across the board. Vast majority of our property crimes offenders and even some of our violent crime offenders are involved in drugs. And I'm going to start at the very lowest, like very low level, entry level drug use. And the fact that, the vast majority of our shoplifters have some type of drug addiction, or like our frequent reoccurring shoplifters. But it goes all the way up to the point where we have 3 homicides that we are investigating, that we've made arrests on, where drug use and drug transactions have turned to females luring males basically into a trap where they have other people waiting to either rob them of the money they're coming to use to purchase drugs, or the drugs themselves. And it's an alarming trend that we're seeing. And like I said, drugs are affecting us from the bottom to the top. And I think as a community, we need to be very vocal. We had a press conference last week on 2 officer-involved shootings. And, they're very unique in the fact that they're both with individuals in mental crisis. And I talked about how we need more resources. Like, we can't expect a good outcome every time when every part of the system has failed and officers are dealing with the least amount of information with an individual in crisis and a fluid situation. Like, there is no 100% good is going to come from that every time. The same thing goes to those with drug addiction. And I really hope that our state legislature and all the policymakers look and they recognize that we have to invest in mental health services. We have to invest in drug services, drug counseling programs, and we have to mandate people. Like, my big complaint with the court system is if they mandated and held people accountable to get treatment, they wouldn't be stuck in this reoccurring crime trend where they're being arrested over and over again. And I throw the challenge out there and I say, by not doing that, who's really creating the pipeline to prison and getting people incarcerated for longer periods of time? It's these reoccurring arrests that lead to longer sentences. It's these reoccurring problems and not dealing with the underlying issue that's causing people to stay incarcerated for longer periods of time. Let's get them the counseling they need. The state has a surplus of money. Let's invest in these two much needed programs within the state of New Mexico. My soapbox for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. The next question is from Tom First, and it says homeless with kids policy. Tom, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, there was a lady with 2 kids coming out of Smith's on a golf course. She was homeless, had a big sign. We gave her some money. She thanked us in broken English. And so I figured this lady doesn't know all the help that is available to her. So I called 311, 242 cops, and this has nothing to do with you. It took me 45 minutes and I never got through. So then I seen her the next day. She's over by Sam's. This time it only took me 20 minutes to get 242 cops. But the problem is they then had to call another agency to help her. I tied up 242 cops for some time trying to get this lady some help. Can we refine that I can contact a separate agency directly and not get the cops involved? My only concern, there are homeless people all over the city. But my problem is kids. They had 2 little tiny kids. If they stepped off the curb, they get killed. So to me, that was the danger. And I wanted to see how to get her help. And I think they did, but I don't see her anymore. But the problem was I had to tie up 242 cops. And is there any way we can bypass that? If we could change the policy that I could call somebody directly.
You know, and without a doubt, there has to be changes to the 242 cops process. Our wait times are much too long. We know that. We're working on it. We're having trouble with our hiring at dispatch and fully staffing that area. But one thing I can tell you is we're looking at different ways of doing things. And one of the pieces of technology we're looking at is artificial intelligence that's a call tree that's going to be able to filter out the call right from the beginning, where you call, it answers, and it says, is this a police-related emergency? Yes. Or is this reference a homeless individual who may need services? And that's going to punch you out of the 242 cops area and into a different area to get them to the proper resources. So we know that with all the changes, the creation of the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, that we have to develop these processes. And Deputy Chief Griego is currently working to see what issues we could, what programs we could bring to help us divert these calls out of 242 cops.
Thank you. That'll work.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chief. The next question is, can I ask about keeping marijuana, drugs, and alcohol away from children, and how police will deal with this change to recreational cannabis?
You know what?
Wait, can I say something? This is Tara. I wrote that question, but my question, can I say what my question is?
Oh, sure, Tara, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know you, like, I'm not on there as a panel or whatever. But Chief Medina, so like, what are the police gonna do about children getting into like alcohol, cannabis, drugs? What is gonna happen to prevent that? Like recently, there was a story about like so many children in Algodones that got into marijuana because somebody brought it to school. Like, what are they gonna do to the parents to hold them accountable? And like how, because now we have recreational, I'm sure it's gonna have more access to children with the cannabis.
And it's very unfortunate that in the situations you speak about, the role of the police department is reactive. And it's after somebody has ingested or used or given these items to a young child that we take action. And that's just the way the system is set up. This goes along the lines of good public education, communication, and people understanding the dangers. I helped develop the APD Party Patrol program. I know all the statistics on alcohol and youth. Like the younger you are, you take first drink, the more likely it is you'll become dependent on it for the rest of your life. The more you use it, the younger age, the less likely what grade levels you'll hit. I mean, the impact is great. The same thing is going to be with marijuana and cannabis. So unfortunately, in a lot of those areas, we are reactive because a crime would have occurred before. We need to beef up public education. I'm currently working with Bernalillo County and the mayor's office, and we're trying to roll out a media campaign talking about the dangers of underage drinking. I'll see if they could add drug consumption onto it and the consequences for adults if they do provide alcohol to minors. We think of it as only alcohol and what it's doing to them, but we also have had a rash of house parties where young adults have lost their lives. And I could think of two particular incidents in the Northwest where these house parties of underage drinking led to shots fired that impacted a whole neighborhood. I'm a Northwest resident. I was woken up by one of these incidents, and I know the fear that it brought into the surrounding neighborhoods. I was one of the surrounding neighborhoods of these incidents. So we have to continue to educate the community the best way we can. And hopefully this grant that we're working for with the county, we could put more educational information out and really hammer the point home of the dangers of all those activities you spoke about.
Yes, and then also, Chief Medina, I think it's also like important for the parents to know, like, hey, if I leave my gun out and my child uses my gun, or like I leave a beer sitting somewhere where a child could drink it, like it should also be the responsibility of the parent. Or the marijuana, left the candies out and the kid got into it and took it to school or whatever, like it should be the responsibility of the parent. But anyways, I appreciate it. Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Tara. And Chief Medina, I'm aware of your time constraints. One last question. Chief, is the increase in fuel costs going to impact APD in terms of decreased patrols or traffic enforcement?
No, it's not going to. We have a budget. Generally, APD is under budget every year. I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank our CEO, Sarita, because they have given us for the first time the ability to finally correct our budget and me the ability to hire and move monies as we need to hire civilians to help with the shortage of officers, hire more PSAs, which is we're trying to get 200 PSAs. But if for some reason our fuel cost line item got low, we would go to the mayor and we would go to council and we'd ask for additional funding. The way our budgets are set up is, basically every quarter we have a means to clean up the budget and ask for additions or ask for additional funding. So if we see that we're short, we could always request that consideration be given to fuel costs. But we have become very proactive. I intend for us to remain proactive. And Deputy Chief Brown, who is on this call every Monday morning, his commander send him a list of the activities and the number of arrests and citations and traffic stops the week before. And if he sees that starting to go down, he will have to address that. But I will not allow officers to use fuel costs as an excuse for them not to be out there proactive enforcing laws every day.
Thank you, Chief Medina. Thank you so much for your time and answering questions, and speedy recovery for your mother.
I hope so. I'm going to go pick up my dad now. So if you need anything else, Deputy Chief Brown is on the call, and just let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
So now we're gonna have Commander David Saladin kind of jump ahead because he is logging in from his cell phone in very windy weather. So Commander.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
can hear you.
All right. I snuck back to my vehicle to hide away from the wind a little bit. My daughter's playing in a district softball game up here at Rio Rancho, but she plays for Volcano Vista, so we're a Northwest family also. And the chief kind of stole some of my thunder, reporting on the crime stats, because I was going to go over those as well. More specific to the Northwest, though, good news is our residential and our commercial burglaries are down, although auto burglary and auto theft are trending up as the weather gets warmer, and this is something we had anticipated. So as the weather warms up, in the winter we warn you about warming up your vehicle. Now as it gets warm in the spring and summer, just be mindful of what you leave in your vehicle and where you park your vehicle. Some good news, the Northwest is still at 0 homicides for the year, knock on wood. We did have our first shooting, and the way they classify it, they classify it as bullet to skin is a shooting. And we did suffer our first one. The good news is it was an accidental shooting. Someone was cleaning their gun and accidentally shot themselves, but they are okay. A couple things that happened recently in the Northwest that I'd like you to be aware of is today at the intersection of McMahon and Unser, we had a gentleman attempt to carjack a vehicle to CVS. So that's another example of just be aware of your surroundings. Constantly head on a swivel, looking around for anything that seems out of the ordinary. And if you see it, please call it in. He attempted to carjack a vehicle to CVS. He was unsuccessful. One of our citizens was able to fight him off, but then he did go to the McDonald's a few stores over and successfully carjacked a pregnant woman. So just look out for that. Look out for each other. Again, anything suspicious in any areas, call it in, and don't think just because you're in the nicer part of town. I mean, Unser McMahon, rarely does anything violent happen up there, but today it did. So please be aware of that. Also, we're starting to see a trend of fuel thefts. Someone went to the Enterprise rent-a-car today and drilled through the gas tanks of 9 of their rental cars and drained the fuel. So please keep an eye on that. If you go to start your car and it doesn't start, check your fuel gauge first and see, because that's something that just popped up today. The chief mentioned all the proactive work that's been going on, and particularly the Northwest. Just in the last 7 days, we had 24 arrests, 18 of which were felony. We cleared 17 warrants, 13 of which were felony. They took over 1,000 calls for service, recovered 5 guns and 3 stolen vehicles. So there's a lot of proactive work going on in addition to responding to your calls for service. I did see in the chat a request for speed enforcement on Coors Bypass, and I've seen it myself. When you do have those requests, please shoot me an email. I put it in the chat, and I get it not only to our motors guys, but to my lieutenants. And the motors guys are fantastic. They'll go out there and in an afternoon write 80 tickets. They really will. And they're very receptive to my requests. All I need to know is location, day of the week, and time that you see it happening. That way it's very specific to when I get them out there. In addition, the lieutenants conduct TAC plans, and those are very successful in especially neighborhoods. Like we were seeing drag racing on Rainbow between Irving and Paseo, and the graveyard lieutenant went out there, did a study, and he found that it's coming from teenagers partying in the Mesa, and then when they come out of the Mesa, they're drag racing and running all those stop signs on Rainbow. We are getting a couple of shots fired calls there too, so he's putting together a TAC plan to address that specifically. But it could be as small as the neighborhoods like down in SR Marmon, where we conduct TAC plans at Miami and Estancia. It can be that specific. I tend to use motors, like where on Ladera between Unser and 98th, where the detour is going, while they were working on the freeway, we were seeing a huge increase in speeding. So that's when I relied on motors to go out there. And they were out there for one morning from 8 to 10 and wrote over 100 citations.
That's my neighborhood.
Right. So you're aware, Mr. Force.
Yes.
We also do have our 3 speed trailers. 2 are in for repair. I had one out on Montano between Coors and Unser, which was another problem area. And I got reports that it was malfunctioning. Went out there and checked it, and sure enough, you know, the speed limit where it's 40, it's flashing that you're speeding at 33 miles an hour. So we got those working on it, and the department was granted some vehicles with license plate readers, and our proactive response team is going to get one of those. So hopefully that will lead to an increase in recovered stolen vehicles. I have a huge list of all the traffic areas. What I'll do is I will send out an email to the CPC so you can see the areas that I already have on my list. But again, if anyone has a problem area, and it doesn't have to be specific to speeding or traffic enforcement, it could be in relation to anything police related, shoot me that email and I'll make sure it goes to the right entity to get the problem addressed.
Thank you, Commander Saladin. Are there any questions for Commander Saladin? Go ahead and put them in the chat. It does not look like we have any right now. Oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Commander, as we walk along the street, we see a lot of outdated registrations on cars. I mean, it's epidemic. You go to a parking lot, half of the cars are outdated. Did they ever look at that? Is that something that the police can do something about? Did they ticket them? What's going on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you see a vehicle parked on a public roadway with an expired registration, please call it in. That is something we can enforce.
Okay.
Good question. It doesn't look like there are any other questions. So Commander, thank you for your time, and we'll let you get back to your daughter's softball game.
All right, thank you. Again, if you have anything, please call me at the sub or shoot me an email. I do my best to check those during any waking hour.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will go on to a presentation from Mariela Ruiz from the Albuquerque Community Safety Department. I believe she is the executive director. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Marcela. I appreciate it. My name is Mariela. I think many of you have met me before. I am the director for the Community Safety Department. I'd love to, I'm a visual person, so I'd love to share my slide if that's okay. I think I need to be enabled to do that. And I think, there it goes. Okay, great. Let me just put this in big mode. Does everybody see my screen okay? Yep. Okay, great. So this is a little bit different. We actually just presented this slideshow with updates to City Council on Monday. So you get to be the next group to kind of preview it. So as you know, ACS is a third branch to public safety. It's a first responder system. And by first responder, it means we're first on scene to calls that come in for 911, 242 cops, and 311 when it's appropriate for ACS. So not every call will come in to ACS. It's obviously we have our police and we have our fire department who do amazing work. But this was really about creating the right response at the right time. And many of the calls don't require a badge and a gun. So we have been going out to mental health, substance abuse, homelessness calls, and other non-criminal types of calls. As many of you know, just briefly, this was done fully implemented and beginning to do the community engagement in 2020. We had already been doing 2 years of what we call rapid experimentation through different programs that, although were very successful, weren't necessarily making the impact that it needed to. And then when George Floyd was murdered, Right Community came out for lots of calls for change around how we interact with people who have mental behavioral health. We started our ideation and development process in June of 2020. We did a 6-month community engagement process where we heard from thousands of Albuquerque residents, as well as facilitations from many people. And then we started the design and implementation that happened fully in September of 2021. So the different types of programs that have been created is our mobile crisis team. This is a co-responder model with APD. So many of you know about that program. These officers live under the crisis intervention unit, and then the clinicians live under ACS. We also have our behavioral health responder. This is 2 responders, and we have 2 today joining us, Renee and Colin. And they go out to mid to low acuity behavioral health calls. So that's been really fantastic. Community responders, these are folks who go to the lowest acuity type of calls, and mostly calls that really don't have any sort of criminal or even mental behavioral health, but really just need, right, an engagement just to kind of check on people. We do this a lot on bus stops right now, making sure that folks who sometimes are sitting at bus stops are actually okay and not overdosing or getting into any sort of problems. We see a lot of crime in some of these areas. And then we have our street outreach responders, and those individuals go out to the big camps. So as many are familiar, Coronado Park and Los Altos, where you might encounter anywhere between 75 and above individuals who are unsheltered. And so they go out really purposely with other city departments as well as other community partners who do street outreach. And lastly, we have our community-oriented response and assistance responders, CORA, and these are folks who go out to traumatic events in the community and work really around connectivity and healing and just really kind of the more deeper type of calls that we see sometimes, such as domestic violence, homicides, in which community really need to have some additional support. And so similar, right? We just as an example, we went out to both the massage parlor homicides where we worked with community and the business community specifically, so that we can hopefully get better insight and understanding and support for those communities who are then feeling very high intensity fear and trauma. We asked for 58 positions. We hired 57. We just had one person pull back, mostly because their timeline changed. But otherwise, we have a wonderful pipeline of folks that we've been able to hire from. We're not in a situation where we're kind of hurting for folks, which has been fantastic, but definitely challenging as we wanted to hire additional individuals, but didn't have enough positions this year. So I think for about 2 weeks, we were the only department that were fully hired. So that was a big accomplishment for us, as we, we're a first of its kind department. So just to kind of get into some quick data, one of the things that changed for us this year, this month that was different from the past months, is that we put together a behavioral health team up at dispatch. First, it was one person, now we're moving on to a second person, but you can see this month, I think we actually almost tripled our numbers from just having behavioral health responders who've done the job as on the field, who were able to then go up to dispatch and work as consultants for those dispatchers and call takers, so that we could have a better understanding of the kind of calls that we could take, and they could understand, but that it was a faster triage process, so that when they were kind of critically thinking like, oh, is this a call for APD or AFR or ACS? We were there to be able to say, this could be ACS and APD, or if this is just an ACS, we'll assess and call APD if we need help. And so it really put us in an amazing spot. What I really want to highlight here is that one, again, our 911 calls went up, but two, that we still took the same amount of unsheltered individual calls, actually doubled, and still took more welfare checks, more behavioral health issue checks, and wellness checks and suspicious. The numbers went up across the board. So this has been, again, it was really meant to be a small pilot for 3 months. We'll see how the quarter ends, but we already are seeing such success that we're considering what that would look like to have people permanently up at dispatch to help with just, that kind of triage process. So just to call for calls for service that we've taken, which is the CFS, we've taken 6452, which is fantastic. It's about half of those were calls that were deferred from from PD, which is really great. I mean, I know it's not a huge percent in the greater scheme of all of the calls that APD gets, but it was, 3,000 calls less that they had to go to, 3,000, calls that they didn't have to spend time with, 3,000 calls that could have gone sideways and didn't. It's for us a big piece of where we are really wanting to grow and grow the model and help support PD where we can. Similarly, we offer our resources. We still go out to what we consider ghost calls or no person found. Again, although it's not an ideal call for us, it's a call that police don't have to go to. We do get to client services, and then we've been doing a really amazing job of co-responding and transporting to different places. So we do voluntary transport. So somebody has to agree to get into the vehicle. We won't force somebody in, but they've been willing. I mean, surprisingly, we've seen a lot more folks willing to go to the shelters, which, hopefully gives a little bit of hope for a lot of us who have seen so many people refuse. And then we've been, again, we co-respond with police and fire. This afternoon, I was at a call actually with Colin and Renee, where we had all three types of responders out to a call that just was a tough one. So it's really great to be able to work together and lean on each other for information and education and just all that stuff. And then you can kind of see Cora as well, where we've assisted year to date, all the referrals that have been made, the children. We do a lot of work with children and older adults, as well as the community. So you can see here, Northwest area, we're all over the city. I will say we're not as right, even though some of our areas are a little more concentrated because of just the difference in areas and the issues that happen in some of those areas. We're really all over the city, and we've even taken calls in the county areas, which has been really great. So we've been working with the sheriff's department just to, be able to have their support and also be able to know that they can use us if they need us as well. Super quick entry to dispatch and this kind of time frame gives you a little bit of an understanding on how long it takes for us to complete a call. So from the time that the call comes in to the time that we leave the scene, it's taking us a little bit of about an hour on average. And this is really great because these are low acuity calls that normally, as it is now, would sit in the queue for potentially an hour and a half. If they're a priority 5, it's potentially 2 hours before they actually even are able to get somebody out. So what this really is helping with is all these kind of lower calls, right? I've heard earlier just in the calls about homeless women. Those were calls that could have gone to ACS, and either the dispatcher didn't feel comfortable or didn't know or wasn't comfortable, whatever it was that they didn't send it to, that could have been a call that was diverted from police, and we could have been out to it pretty quickly. So I think that's where we're really trying to work with dispatch so that they could understand our role. As you know, many of you know, we're setting a precedent. We're working with lots of media, getting lots of attention from across the nation, which has also led to a lot of thought partner work. So we're being seen as leaders at a national level, along with our cahoots in Portland and Star in Denver, who have just been doing amazing work as well, very differently, but very similarly in the sense that we're all kind of achieving the same, trying to get to the same goal. And so we've been sitting on a lot of different national, local, and state groups, coalitions. As many of you will see in the budget going forward, we are asking for double our numbers. And so what that means is what we received last year was about 7.8 million. And this year we're asking for just about the same amount of money. So it puts us at about 15.4. And that would allow us to, one, get to that 24/7 coverage that we really want to do sustainably and not just kind of, right, not very purposely. And then we want to make sure that we can dedicate to some of those area commands that we know there's a ton of calls for service. A lot of our officers could use support in those areas. And I think that that's going to be really important for us to do as well. And then, we chose very specifically the amount of individuals, which is about 68 more people, more responders because one, we have the pipeline for individuals who are really wanting to get into this work, but two, we were a new department, didn't even have our HR team set up, and we were able to hire 58. So we really feel like now, as we're a little bit more established, we understand the processes. I think it's realistic on our hiring goals. And then lastly, we just as APD and AFR have done a fantastic job of creating this career ladder, we similarly have done the same. So it allows us to then have people coming in at entry level, getting them trained up, and then having even people all the way up to clinicians and division managers, where then there's a really nice pipeline for people to be able to have some longevity at city, as a city employee. So those are really things that we've learned from our other departments, and just the work that's already kind of been established within fire and police. We did not want to reinvent wheels. I'll leave it with a quote from one of our behavioral health responders, and then I'll open it up for questions and whatever. We can also engage with Renee and Colin as well.
Okay, thank you. That's incredible. So we do have our first question from Steve, and I called 311 for CS on a street person in distress and told to call 242 cops. Who do you call?
So that's going to be a tricky one. 311 has a hard time because they get a lot of encampment calls. And then if it's somebody who might be in distress, like in your situation, it is a 911 call. So let's say it was just a person panhandling, 242, that could be a 311 call. Somebody who was in distress, it's always going to be a 242 cops and potentially a 911. And they're both about the same. It just depends on how they get answered. So that's the big difference. I think the language that you use too, like do they look like they're highly escalated, right? A woman walking down the street naked is a very highly escalated situation. You want to use those words, right? Very specifically. A man without shoes on the street, probably a 311 call that could easily say, look, there's a man that looks like he might be homeless, looks like a little hungry. That probably is not going to generate a 911 call. So I think really figuring out, and I think this is where the chief and myself and even the chief of the fire department have really been thinking about how we educate on 911, 311, 242 cops so that people really have a good understanding of when to call what number. And then we're having 988. So for those that have been really involved, there's a whole other number coming down the pipeline in this summer that's around crisis from a national level. So happy to present on something on that down the road.
That's incredible. So this is from Tom, and where would homeless with kids, where would that call be directed to is what I'm guessing, right, Tom?
Yeah.
That one comes in on both. We see it from a 311 and a 911 level. We get that quite often. A lot of times we actually just see it and we'll jump in and try to intervene right away. We can normally get them set up pretty quickly if they have children at one of the wellness hotels that the city and the county have. So we jump in pretty quickly, but similarly, and I think a lot of these calls, like anything that says homeless or unsheltered without a crisis, right? Even if you have, we know that the crisis is with children, but for them, they might just be living out of their car, and that's maybe a normal thing every 6 months. So it really will generate, and it's much easier for us to go out to that call because showing up with an officer might make them feel nervous and scared and not know. But the great part is we've been working really closely with police. So even if an officer got sent to that call, there's a process now for officers to be able to call for ACS to come out so that we can relieve them and they can go on to the next call.
Oh, that's great. So I don't see any more questions right now. So can we hear from, Karen? Is that your hand?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Are all of your people dispatched from downtown? Or are you dispersed at all?
We're across the entire board. I would say that our responders are in their vehicles 90 5% of the day. We are looking to broaden our space. We are located downtown, which hasn't been ideal, but we're making it work. But we tend to have folks up in the Heights. We place where we can, and they're not necessarily standard there. Like, they're not stuck there. So if the West Side got a call, if somebody was on the West Side and they got a call to go to the East Side, they're going to go, whoever's available. That's why I think the big piece of why we want to hire up, so that we can have, right, Colin and Renee can be located always in the Northwest area, always be able to, right, get to know the neighbors, get to know the command centers, get to know the officers. And that way it's, you recognize faces, you can be part of community meetings, and all that really good stuff that happens when you can have really purposeful people in your part of town.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
So we have a thank you, Mariela. Thank you for AOC attending and speaking at the SR Mormon Neighborhood Annual Meeting. So and now can we hear from Renee Monteverde about kind of like what a day is? Oh, ACS. Okay. What a day is like for you? Like a typical
Yeah,
day?
so hi everybody. I am a BHR with ACS. My name is Renee Monteverde. So me and Colin are partners. We work our swing shift hours, and that's going to be from 11 to 8. And like Mariela was saying, we're all over Albuquerque. So depending on what kind of calls pop up in the CAD, that's the area we're in. A typical day for us is just responding to 311 tickets. Like I said, the CAD, sometimes, most of the time, actually, now that it's getting warm, we do see a lot more of panhandlers. We do see unsheltered with children, and we're able to create calls. So we'll go ahead and create a call and get those folks some help. But 98% of the time we're in the vehicle.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? What would you say is the most, well, I guess we can hear from Colin. You guys are partners. And is that 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 11 p.m. to 8 a.m.?
I'm sorry. So that's 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay. So Colin, do you want to kind of elaborate on your day or your perspective, or
Sure. Can you guys hear me? So yeah, I mean, we're actually in the car right now. But yeah, like Renee said, our day really consists of just always being out in the field. And that makes it easier when, dispatch gives us a call, we're already out there, ground level. So that makes the efficiency issue, it reduces that. And yeah, we've just been having fun out here. So.
Do you guys want to talk a little bit about, Colin and Renee, although very humble, our dream team of ours, they come with lots of resources and amazing backgrounds, but they have been out to quite a few welfare checks, which has been a call that we've seen an uptick in for ACS. Do you, and Renee or Colin, do you want to expand on what that looks like? And when we've had to engage police or fire?
Yeah, so we've had some great encounters with AFR lately. They've been actually in the Northwest Command. They'll call us saying, we have a female here. She's unsheltered. She's experiencing some DV. She has an 8-month-old baby. We don't know what to do. What can we do? So we meet them and we kind of shed some light. We also had a similar situation, but with APD, and it's been really nice because APD has been calling us out more, saying, hey, this is a DV situation. The scene is safe, it's clear, but they need some resources. I'm not sure, where could they stay for the night? Where can they get case management services? How can they get out of this situation permanently? And it's really nice because one of our departments is Cora. So we're able to make that referral to them so they can follow up. We also have established great relationships with other coalitions around Albuquerque, Las Tunas, Santa Fe. So we're able to call around to see, you know, what shelters will accept these individuals. Yeah, we've been working great with AFR and APD. I'm really excited. I hope I answered the question correctly or right, but yeah, that was a couple of Colin and I, we responded to. So, and it was nice because, you know, it's nice to see that we could engage so well together and work so well together.
Yeah, the common good. I love it. Who else has some questions?
I had one question. What is your impression really from the beginning of working with APD?
Colin, do you want to tell them what you did before? I'm so sorry if I'm putting you on blast, and I apologize.
No, not a problem. So I was a police officer with APD for about 6 years before I did this. That job really, you know, helped me develop the skills that I needed for this job in order to, you know, talk to people and de-escalate people and, you know, just crisis intervention in general. So, but yeah, I mean, like Renee and Mariela said before, you know, our interactions with APD thus far have been great. We had one the other day where we had a woman who was experiencing mental health issue at Caseman, and APD actually requested us because they heard of us and they didn't know what to do with this woman because she needed a certain service and you know, to be able to go to a shelter. And so when we got there, we were able to kind of talk with her and we were able to, you know, facilitate her getting to a shelter. So, and that was, you know, that call proved that, you know, us, ACS and APD can work in conjunction. And it was beautiful to see, actually. So.
Colin was, you know, it's been fantastic. We're really happy. I think it was a good transition for him and for us, and even for the police department. I think everyone was just really nice that we could see that bridge. Renee, do you want to talk about your background? Similarly, you have an amazing background with that, worked with police before as well.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard of the county started a program called the LEAD program, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. And so I was a case manager where I would meet APD or BCSO out on the scene, and they would divert, you know, drug charges, drug paraphernalia, low offense, petty misdemeanors, and get them straight to treatment. And so that's what I did for quite some time. And then prior to that, I worked with several organizations doing the same thing, working with individuals that suffer from co-occurring disorders and just establishing relationships with the community. So I have an extensive background doing that. And it's also prepared me for this role because it's nice to be able to be like, oh, I've worked with this organization, let me connect you here. Or I know a case manager with LEAD, let me make this referral and do a warm handoff. So it's been quite a transition, and I can't complain because I'm grateful for my past experiences.
And a lot of our staff have really great relationships. I mean, Albuquerque is a big city, small town. We all kind of have some degree away from each other. And so because of that, there's just a lot of really amazing relationships with people who are like, my cousin's a police officer, or right. We've had firefighters that are coming over to APS. Again, I think that there's lots of folks who I think went into the field of public safety for goals, but didn't necessarily fit that culture or fit that dynamic. And now with this third option, I think we're seeing, and we did have quite a few, people from the police and the fire department apply to come over to ACS. So I can see how there's some folks who might want to do this work just because it's different. It's again, it gets to the same goal, right? You're getting to helping people and getting them resources and having just that good relationship. You just don't have this, it's a different tactic, a different way to do it. And a different look as well, like a different look when you're approaching. So yeah, I think we'll see a nice growth, and I think the relationship with APD will continue to grow. I think, you know, with the chief and the two chiefs and myself, it's been a really good, just been a really good relationship so far.
Do you find that the public knows who you are at this point, or is it still a point where everybody sees the uniform and they don't really know what's going on?
I don't know. What do you, Colin, Renee, what are your thoughts?
You know, I some days I'm like, wow, we're getting all these calls from APD and AFR, and we're known, and it's been great. And then some days I'm like, ACS could have took that call, you know, only if you would have known about us. You know, I know Tom mentioned earlier about an unsheltered woman and her children, and only if he would have asked for ACS, you know, we would have been out there immediately to help these families. And so I feel like we're making progress. We're doing our diligence to make sure, you know, we're going to meetings, and I correct me if I'm wrong, Mariela, but I did hear, you know, supervisors talk about going to briefings and stuff like that, and just making our faces known more, talking to the public. We do a lot of outreach with other organizations. So, you know, we're getting there.
Well, and Colin and Renee will be famous because we're doing some marketing. We received some funding from a grant to do a little bit more marketing. I mean, I think a big piece of this is branding and making ourselves known in the community. And so them, as well as some other responders, will be we'll be doing a lot of marketing in the next 6 months, really just to kind of get our name out there and continue to push, you know, that there is this new branch. I will say lots of people see us, like we get a lot of people, it's like, I recognize your like patch, like, what is that about? I see your cars everywhere. So there's definitely some visuals, like people are seeing us. They just may not know exactly what we do yet.
I believe there's a question from April Perkins. I am wondering if APD calls are substantiated. APD is known to go to people's homes when calls are unsubstantiated.
Can you just define what your thoughts are on what substantiated? I wasn't sure if that's like,
yeah, I'm not sure who that is,
or like, you know, proactive.
April, did you want to put some more information in the chat, and we can go to something else?
Kelly, can we allow April to talk briefly?
Okay, April, you.
Sure. I'm just wondering if these calls they're going to are actually substantiated. Sometimes the information which has been given is not true, and they show up at these people's houses and they confront these people with completely false and inaccurate information, and they were never supposed to go to their home. And they're just completely, they don't treat the people correctly.
From like a 911, you mean?
From APD.
So this would be like a call to 911 that then would send out APD?
I don't know how they get the information. I just know it's not substantiated. And they still are sent to their homes.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an example, that would be really great. I think the big piece about, and again, I can't speak for the police specifically, but I will say, because we get dispatched by 911 dispatchers, that call is vetted pretty heavily. I mean, to a point, you know, because it's a life and death, you're walking into a scene and dispatch is qualifying those calls. So if somebody is not calling and police is just randomly showing up to homes, well, one, we'd love to know, but two, right, and I'm sure the chief would like to know, but three, I think there's just, we'd love to know like what that might be looking like, just because we, you know, from an ACS perspective, and even from probably a PD, there's self-initiated calls, like if there was, so for example, this evening, we went to a call that was for a suicide ideation, and had multiple levels of just complexities. they had called in the past for other stuff, and tonight it was a call from their mother who was doing a welfare check for, again, suicide ideation. He did not answer the door, and there wasn't enough information for us to have AFR or to go into the home to check on this individual. So we will generate a welfare check, or at least a follow-up, tomorrow within the next 24 hours to see if we can get in contact with this individual again, just so that we can make sure that he's safe, and hopefully we can make contact with him. And I know police, and at least crisis intervention unit, does a lot of that too. Like if they are meant to go out to call and someone doesn't answer, sometimes the clinicians that work with the police officers, or Coast, right? I think the Coast is, you guys are familiar with Coast, will do follow-up calls to say, hey, we were here yesterday and your mom was really worried. We just wanted to come and check on you again. So that's something that, depending on how you define substantiated in regards to evidence-based, I think, I think it could go different ways.
I'll take that from the APD side, actually.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh.
Sure. So my name is Josh Bennett. I'm the deputy chief of the field. I oversee all 6 area commands. So when the calls come into dispatch, they essentially get triaged either to ACS or APD, and how they get pushed out. If it stays on the APD side, what essentially happens is if the call goes through, it's going to go through the 911 process, and then there's to be certain questions that are asked by dispatch. So each call that gets sent through and gets dispatched out to officers does get substantiated in a couple different ways. The dispatchers listen to the call taker, they ask multiple questions, and then they also kick that call over to the RTCC if it meets that criteria, where they'll do an extra background check on that address as they're headed over there. That way it gives the officers the most amount of information when they go. Our dispatch isn't going to send somebody to a house for no reason. And if they do, let me know, because that's not what we're there for, and that's not what APD does. So
thank you. So this sounds like from April. So April is asking for contact information. Deputy Chief Brown, if you want to drop your email in the chat, if you're
sure,
okay
I'll
with
drop
that.
my email in the chat. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So April, I hope that answers your questions. And are there any more questions for APD or ACS? Okay, well, that's incredible. Thank you so much to Mariela and Renee and Colin. Please feel free to stick around. We appreciate your time and information, and thank you for doing this work. It's really important. So moving on, let's hear from Pete Galbert, if you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Marcella. I appreciate it. On the crime prevention side, we've been real busy working with the proactive response team. Some of the incidents we've been doing is some of these businesses, big box stores, Walmart, Home Depot, some of the cellular stores, and even restaurants. We're seeing the trend where we're getting commercial robberies, shopliftings have been turned into armed robberies. So what I'm doing on the crime prevention side, I'm actually providing education and training the employees and also the staff on what to do when they call 911, what to say, what information the dispatcher needs, description, vehicle description, if these people are armed. And one of the other things I give them is personal safety also. I went to an AT&T store yesterday where they actually closed their store because employees were afraid. One employee was assaulted, the other one was threatened. Within the last 2 weeks, they got robbed. So I talk to them when it comes to personal safety, what to do, what not to do, what to be aware of. And I'm doing a lot of what we call business security assessments. And I did a business security assessment at the AT&T and gave them some suggestions. So part of crime prevention is we provide the resources, we give them some directions when it comes to additional security for their employees, their staff, just to keep them safe. So that's been keeping me busy I know Chief Harold Medina was talking about coffee with the cop in the Northwest Area Command. We had one last month, and I'm looking at getting another coffee with the cop next month as the warm weather gets here. We're going to be getting more and more coffee with the cop. Also, April 30th, that's on a Saturday, and it's going to be held at the Albuquerque Police Academy. We are having what we call the citywide block captains meeting. So any block captain citywide, it'll be from 9 to 11:30, and we'll have several speakers there for anyone who's a block captain out there. April 30th, Saturday, be at the Albuquerque Police Academy. Again, for those of you that are out there, please spread the word around when it comes to neighborhood patrols, because we want to be proactive. I just actually conducted a training for the Nob Hill Association. They were interested in starting a neighborhood patrol. Also, neighborhood watch programs, very effective. Like I keep telling people, we need your eyes, we need your ears, so that if you see something, say something, and then, dial the 242 cops or 911. But please, I've got my email, I've got my phone number. Let's start a neighborhood watch, and let's go ahead and start a block captain. The block captain has worked very well. Block captains are assigned an officer for that area. They have the officer's email, and they also have his phone number. So if they need to contact him, they have that resource. So that's kind of a contact with block captains. Additional resource from 311, 242 cops, and 911. Did someone have a question out there? No. Again, if anyone wants information, wants to start up a neighborhood watch, wants to start up a neighborhood patrol, please get a hold of me. My phone number and my email is on the chat. Again, Marissa, thank you very much.
Pete.
Yes, Tom.
Listen, I wanted to tell you, thank you. My wife, she's the block captain, and we had and I'm the president of the neighborhood association, and we had a abandoned truck, and it was there for a year. And we contacted our local constable on patrol, and she took care of it. And within a week, it was gone. And I said, wow, that's community policing. And I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, excellent program. I'm glad that it's working. And you had, some personal experience in that. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Pete. Are there any other questions or comments, ideas? Anything? All right. Well, thank you, Pete.
You're very welcome, Marcella.
So what's next, Kelly? Seems like is it public comment time?
Yeah, if anyone has any public comments, any public comments, any ideas for future workshops, guests, or any questions that have not been answered yet, you can raise your hand. We can promote you for a second to give your opinion, or you can just put them in chat.
Ooh, you know what? We do have a nice little shout out from Carlos. He says, I had a great meeting at the Ace Hardware on golf course on safety and prevention for our employees and customers. Some very good information to use not only at work, but at home. So that's awesome.
Yes. Okay. And if there's nobody who wants to make a public comment, has a question or an idea, I guess we come to the end of the agenda.
Well, all right. Thank you all for being here. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, May 18th, 2022 at 6 p.m.
And that's going to be in person?
Kelly?
That is what we will work on, yes. The same location we've had it before. We're trying to get that going for people. We still do not have a camera, but I'm trying to get that done in the next week or two. So
Sounds good.
So Kelly, you said Same location, so Don Newton Community Center.
There we go.
Is that where you're talking?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, Tara.
Thank you.